Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me for the final Godcast of 2025 is a very special guest from across the pond, the Very Reverend Winnie Varghese, who is the Dean of St. John the Divine in New York City. Winnie, it's wonderful to get you on. How are you?
Oh, great. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Do you enjoy this time of year, this madness before the big day?
I love Christmas. I think priests aren't supposed to, but I love Christmas. I love the anticipation of Christmas. I'm sad that Advent is wrapping up and we don't get to hear those hymns long enough any year. So I'm I'm like an Energizer bunny this time of year. I'm so excited.
Winnie, you don't originate from New York, although it's your home now. I understand you grew up in Dallas, is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's very exotic for you all, but yeah, Dallas, Texas.
Are there any similarities between the two places? I've never been to either of them.
Yeah, one similarity. I was just talking to someone who's also a New Yorker now from Houston. That Houston and Dallas are very, very moneyed cities. They're large cities. Houston is larger, but Dallas is a very large city, and there is so much oil money and old cattle money and now tech and finance money. So it's a very sophisticated city in that way. It's a much, in our country. And tell me if I'm being too insider in this. In our country, every city, every major city is blue, all of them, whatever state they're in. And which is, so that includes Texas and Georgia. And um, so, so Dallas, Texas, and Houston, Texas. Houston is the most diverse city in our country, not Los Angeles, not New York, not San Francisco. It's Houston. Dallas is also an extraordinarily diverse city because, one, because Black people moved to Texas post enslavement and during the Great Migration, and huge populations of Black people, very few indigenous people remaining in Texas. And then Texas was part of Mexico and was purchased from Mexico essentially. So there are people that are five or six generations Texans all over Texas who have Spanish last names, might be Spanish speakers, and then people like my family in Dallas and Houston in particular, but also in Lubbock, came in the 60s and 70s when immigration was opened to India and to other communities that it had been closed to in Asia and in Africa, and came to serve, to work. There was a very narrow bandwidth of who could come. So, of engineering degrees, medical degrees, some accounting and technical degrees. And so and then there's corporations, Ross Perot and others are in Dallas. So there's this really prosperous upper middle class, really wealthy community, and and really struggling communities that are really, really diverse. Some of the best food in the country is in Dallas and Houston.
Really? And
And
happy memories of your childhood there?
yeah, and also I'd also say all kinds of church.
Yeah.
All kind really, really diverse expression of church, all kinds of Orthodox churches, as well as the evangelicals you would imagine. So yeah, like most kids, you grow up in your house and in the community that your parents provide for you, if you're lucky, which I did. So very, and I lived in India when I was little for a while, all very sweet, and didn't understand that everybody didn't think we were great until I was in college, high school and college.
When you were in high school and college, Winnie, did you ever imagine that one day you'd be the Dean of St. John the Divine in New York City? What were your goals and aspirations back then?
Yeah, I graduated from high school in 1989. Women were ordained in our church in the late 70s. But I had attended Marthama and Church of South India congregations growing up because they're in Malayalam. So my parents wanted to worship in their home language. So, and also the Marthama and CSI Church technically can ordain women, and my parents are from the very liberal side of those churches, but they don't where we're from in our town, in our area in Central Kerala. So I remember having a call, very clearly knowing I was going to be a priest when I was 17, not knowing what that meant, literally wondering if there was such a thing
Mm.
as a woman who was a priest. I had never encountered that. And I didn't know what it would mean. And our priests in our congregation weren't paid, they were people that did jobs and everybody put church together on Sunday. We were very early in that. So I thought it meant, okay, that's something I might find a place to do on Sunday when I'm really old, like 40 or something. But I kind of filed it away. I didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
So no, just big no. But I did know what St. John the Divine was because it was famous among the more liberal parts of our church as a place that thought about earth and kind of way before this time was thinking about the dangers of what was happening to the earth and they did the Gaia Mass there. They made the news And I'd seen that news, and that was the part of it. That was the church I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah, and the Episcopal Church, Winnie, it's I think it's known in the UK, and to be frank, most of my listeners are over here, but I've always have numerous American guests on. How would you kind of package the Episcopal Church to people who are kind of here thinking, well, I'm an Anglican, or I'm a Roman Catholic, or I'm a Methodist? What would you say?
What is the Episcopal Church? So one, I'll say it's hard to describe yourself from within. I've not really been anything else except an Indian Anglican and an Episcopalian. I think the thing even most Episcopalians find confusing, but is true about us, is we are very much a broad church. So in my experience, people that will say they're high church or low church, or we rarely hear low church in our country, but high church, really are more on the spectrum of broad and formal. So we're more formal than the church I experience in England, and there is such a thing as very high. There's always at least a couple of very high congregations in every diocese. But many people who think they're higher church, I think we're fit in a broad church category, technically. So it's very American. I think each place is distinct. We know we're distinct, and yet we feel like we're part of this whole. And for many in this country, which I learned late, are like me. They are in the church of their ethnic heritage. Their families are from the British Isles. That might be 7 generations ago or 2 generations ago. So there's a cultural piece that they're carrying in the same way that the Presbyterians are carrying a very particular cultural piece. But then today, all those churches are a little bit more diverse. And to be real clear, like it's in like 10% or less, that diversity range of where we come from. But interestingly, where most of us come from, that are in kind of create that diversity in our church, are also from places where we were Anglican. And so that infusion of international Anglicanism throughout the communion is informing our church. But and there's a strong Black American tradition here as well. That is, I was just in South Africa. It feels very much like the church in South Africa, very Anglo-Catholic, but very diverse in its expression, and then very socially engaged. But I think we fit in the broad middle of what Anglicanism looks like, with a formality that I've only seen here and in South Africa, kind of a formality to how we worship. And then I think our calling card, and one that we're a little cynical about at times, but I find again at the cathedral is very moving to people, is that we welcome you, that we're not a closed group, and we're speaking in response to fundamentalism in this country, and to frankly a white Christian nationalism in this country. That we welcome you as you are, that we believe Jesus meets you where you are, and how Jesus meets you and engages you will probably be something we learn from, as opposed to something we solely teach you.
Do you think that's something unique about cathedrals, Winnie? I recently had the Dean of Southwark Cathedral, who you might have met, Mark Oakley, and also the Dean of Canterbury, David Malteith. Sorry, Malkeith, forgive me, I misrepresent his name there. But this general feeling, and I get a real warmth from speaking to generally deans more than I do bishops, because they seem to have this kind of more compassionate approach to welcome and everybody. Is that unique to cathedrals, would you say?
Well, I think one of the gifts of a cathedral is that in most of us in our charters, we are for the city. Again, whatever your politics are, however you understand the world, we're for the city. So you don't come and frankly take this role if that isn't compelling to you. And it won't be like a parish in that way. So we just had a meeting with our congregation yesterday, and it's a really beautiful balance of the stakes, at St. John the Divine, to be a stakeholder. We have to raise $20 million a year, right? It's not appropriate to ask a congregation to do that. But if you are the congregation of the cathedral, this is part of who we are. We hold that together. And so if I'm going to spend my year, raising $20 million, and we are for the city, and we are a proclamation of Christ's light to the city of New York, by definition, right, that is for everyone. And how I know to speak of Christ in that has to be rooted in the place and the history and what's going on in our city at the time. And I just think that's a really interesting way to think. I can imagine for some that could be isolating, so this wouldn't be the role for you. It doesn't have the support of congregational leadership in the way that I came from a very large parish in the South. Extraordinary support from congregational leadership to accomplish everything we needed to accomplish. And again, a multi-million-dollar budget to achieve, but together. And it's a little bit more, those things are more professionalized in the place I am now, and aren't solely defined by congregation. So that does mean there's a breadth and an interfaith breadth that I think is really beautiful.
Yeah. Gosh, 20 million, $20 million. I mean, it puts it into some perspective, but I do think raising money is relative wherever you are. You know, we have to raise £40,000 a year, but even that's a struggle for us. But I
Absolutely.
wanted to ask you something about that balance between the regular congregation, those who are there every service or every Sunday or whenever it might be, against the tourism congregation, and how the two, don't kind of get in the way of each other, but also welcome each other. Could you say a bit about that dynamic?
Yeah, one is I think you all have to deal with it more than we do because London has, I think I read this right. It's more, it has the largest number of tourists of any city in the world, I believe. So New York is a big city, but we don't get the scale. We actually don't have the scale of tourism that you all have um, at all. And interestingly, and New York is hard to visit now. This country is hard to visit. So that said, and post-pandemic, we have many fewer tourists than we used to have. I remember attending the cathedral when I was a student, and half, if not more than half, of the congregation were tourists. Now we tend to have visitors that might be coming from other parts of the country who are Episcopalians. So that's easy. They're delighted to be there. We're delighted to welcome them. We have some tourists that come from around the world, but I have to say I was surprised by how few that is at this point. And like on St. Paul's and others, because we charge to get in the door, I find it interesting. All you've got to say is that you're going to come pray and you're good. It's interesting to me who doesn't, and it's not, and especially on a Sunday morning, it's so easy to just say, just do it. And I guess I appreciate the integrity if people just decline to do that and aren't sure they want to pay to come in. So we don't get that. When I was here before, there was a flood of tourists. There was rope set out so that they could walk around and take pictures and not disturb the service. That is not true anymore for us.
And has the dynamic of what's the correct the horizon changed for you with the uh, recently new administration in Donald Trump, and this kind of nationalistic right wing kind of approach to politics? Is that making life more difficult for you to flourish or to raise funds?
It's interesting in terms of in terms of like the flourishing of humans in our community. Absolutely, it's more difficult. I mean, I had this experience the last time Trump was president. It's frankly, a very clear time to be the church. So it's not positive, but it's so, where when we have a more moderate government, we're a tradition that's disinclined to create controversy, right? Even in the name of the gospel. So it's very provocative to say, hey, what about incarcerated people? What about LGBT people? Like just to name a thing that doesn't have urgency behind it, doesn't feel like it must be named, is to generate controversy, right? And so that's harder for us in the main line in this country. But when the president is saying that immigrants are garbage or that nations are garbage, that's easy. Even our most conservative members, if they believe that, are disinclined to say it out loud. And overwhelmingly, our people are just distressed by it, and it's our people. So, so it feels very clear that we know what our role is, and that and this is one of those moments in the main line in the city like New York, where we're still part of the establishment. It feels great to take the power and authority and prestige and dignity of the church and put it alongside the most vulnerable people. And my experience is our givers and our supporters, our congregation are so moved by that.
Yeah,
So it's very clear.
yeah, I think it's really important what you've said there. One of the criticisms I have of the church I'm part of, I'm in the north of the UK, Winnie, just so you know, in a small provincial town called Burnley. When you look at the national church, is how slow we are sometimes to respond. Tommy Robinson, who I'm sure you know that name, has been gaining huge traction in this country and is almost trying to claim the Christian. Yeah, you've got your little doggy there, people who are watching. I've got a Patterdale Terrier over here. I must get him before the end of the podcast. But yeah, who are kind of hoovering up all the kind of uh, unsure or heritage Christians who've not been to church for years and saying this is how it should be, this is what we want. And it's only now that the national church, I feel, is responding to that. What's your thoughts on that? I have this kind of saying. I think it's really important to be at the front of the curve and not kind of catching up in these matters. Where are you as a cathedral?
I completely agree with you. I mean, we don't, again, like there's a clarity in this moment. It is what the larger evangelical movement, which is external to our church, that's not part of our denomination here. That is what, white Christian nationalism is what they have been selling that my entire adult life. we have been very reluctant to speak to it because it's not us and because it hasn't been an elected power. It's a movement underneath, or it's a movement of the religious right. And they've picked these issues that are very difficult for the church, right? LGBT issues, abortion, when they don't frankly care about any of those things. Like they're talking about white nationalism. And we have been suckers for it as a church, in my opinion. I feel very, very strongly about it. I'm sure you can't tell. But it has come to its logical conclusion. And it is documented. It is a resistance to the civil rights movement and the equality movements. It's not about women or LGBT people or abortion. That's not what it's about. It's about race. Everything else is a little disguise to provoke us because we're easily provoked, and I think it's ridiculous. It's fundamentally about race, and I'm not convinced that everyone doesn't actually know that underneath somewhere. That we're talking about race. And so this movement comes in response to the civil rights movement to try to turn it around, and right now it's about to do it. That's what we're seeing in our country. You're seeing a version of the same thing in your country. It's all over the world. It's in India, right? It's about diversity and crushing diversity, religious diversity, ethnic diversity, and class equity, and frankly, in India, dignity for the poor, for Dalit people. So our cathedral, one of the reasons I came, frankly, I never thought I'd do this job, frankly, because wouldn't have wanted to. It wasn't very interesting. But one of the reasons I came is our bishop is outspoken and unquestioning on these issues, doesn't think twice about them. And this cathedral's heritage is that it stands up, and it stands up bravely. So civil rights, anti-apartheid, all of the movements of the 20th century, and not afraid to be called of the times, not seeing that as somehow in contrast to the gospel, that Christ doesn't speak through the times, and the liberation of people. And that God is not appalled by the poverty and suffering of God's people. So one of the reasons I'm at the cathedral is how great to be somewhere in our church where you can actually speak what you believe the gospel is called to and gather people for whom this is the good news they need to hear. So we are very clear. I'll say honestly, I think our national church, we have different, we have new leadership, and great leadership. But I think leadership that probably isn't used to standing in this particular place in public and social life in a way that Michael Curry was more comfortable standing. So it's interesting to watch how they're going to negotiate that. And probably, frankly, I think when you come from the white communities of our church, which are the vast majority, a little bit of the rumbling of what's happening now is always in the room. The people that are a little racist, a little bit believe our country is being taken from us, a little bit believe we all smell and eat wrong, and all the things that the president said about our mayor-elect, that we're all a problem unless we're white enough. There's a little bit of that rumble in all of our communities all the time. We know that. What's happened right now is that's out in public. And I do think some parts of our church are struggling to know what to do, because part of what they're telling us is they hear this stuff all the time. And you just kind of pat that one on the head, or you move by, or you might agree. But we know we don't do that in public. And so they don't know how to engage it in public because, frankly, they're part of it in private.
Yeah. Winnie, you're a star. I'm loving this. I've got lots of questions I've got to get through because these are important questions for our church in the UK. You talked there about the white nationalists aren't interested in LGBTQ issues, but there are a lot of Christians that are very concerned about them, regardless of what side of the fence you sit on. And I'm part of the National General Synod. I'm a member of Inclusive Church, and I've been fighting for same-sex rights for as long as I've been on the synod. And you may be familiar with a thing in the UK called Living in Love and Faith. This idea to try and even allow a same-sex couple to have a blessing. And the church, the House of Bishops in the Church of England have kind of put that on hold and virtually brought everything to a shuddering halt, which is causing huge consternation against the liberals and the progressives. What would you say to people here in the UK who are kind of now in a place of almost kind of, I think there's a lot of people who are very demoralised about the national church here and where it stands and how it's not conceding any ground, and a lot of people are suggesting this is about power, it's about money, those kind of things. I would very much value your thoughts.
Well, so I suspect it's true for you all too. I've tried to follow your process, and I don't completely understand what's happening. We don't. So I feel so. Let me not pretend I understand. But what I can say is I'm 53. My entire adult life, all of my college years, seminary, discernment process, my entire adult life until a few years ago, we were fighting for to say we were human and that we weren't monsters and that we weren't perverts. And when I think about it now, what a way to live your life in the church. So I recognize, where you are, and this is true in India. I was just in South Africa. And I'm sorry. I don't know another way to be an adult in the church because that's what we did, and for us and for our friends. And for me, I mean, people I just adored, the most gentle, wonderful, beautiful people that died, in their 70s, having not gotten to a place where they were seen as human beings by their church. And you can probably hear it. I have a really strong advocacy side to me. It's probably a link to a disability that has not been diagnosed yet. And so just my own outrage that that all of these people that, like that I love, and I come up. The 80s were HIV and AIDS and silence equals death, and Ronald Reagan mocking people who were dying in our country. So all of these tools have so dehumanized us, and I think it's happening to you all as well, that you're separated from other human beings by being told they're somehow less human, right? And so those of you that are fighting for the dignity of yourselves and your friends, God bless you. I'm just so sorry. It was horrible, and there were so many people that were closeted, that were so cruel to the rest of us, and that would tell us to be, like, I remember repeatedly being told by older men to be closeted, so that I could have a career. And I think mostly what they were saying a little bit out of care for me, not a lot. It was to justify their lives and the fact that they were going to be voting the wrong way and that they wanted to keep the jobs they had because that was the income they had. So that mess, that emotional mess, is familiar to me. And no, I'll just say in our church, none of that was conceded graciously. There was no moment where the bishop said, "Oh, we're on your side now." The majority of bishops fought us all. Everyone now, as the writers say, if everybody on the that says they were on the bridge at Selma was on the bridge would have collapsed. Everyone now is on our side. I remember the people that threatened people like me, that put us on lists of people that were going to destroy the church, that meant that we started to get death threats, that undermined every job I had, that tried to call us everything they could that had nothing to do. I mean, I remember those times, and I'll tell you what changed them. One was a couple of strategy sessions around just like doing the numbers, which we all do, of how we get the votes. But it's what's happening in your church right now, if I understand it correctly, with all these deans, is people started to come out, and some of them came out by choice, and some of them came out because they were advised by others to come out on their own terms, or they could help them. And that was by activists in the church who knew who all the closeted bishops were. For us, it was bishops, and they weren't outed. But when Gene Robinson, who's going to be here for dinner tomorrow and with us this weekend, when Gene Robinson's consents were going through, I remember hearing from old guys who had been in integrity forever and had fought this fight forever and were really like very, very elderly, saying they knew who all the people were in the house. They knew them personally and were threatening to literally hold up a banner just with their names on them at the next meeting. Like, it got ugly before it came around. And we were, as you know, we were threatened by archbishops of Canterbury, our presiding, threatened, I think, is the right word. And our archbishops and our bishops were told to stop repeatedly. And they did many times. And because that happened so many times, it got really ugly near the end. And I don't think we would be here if we hadn't fought, frankly, as hard as they did. And a bunch of us stood up and were out the entire time.
I tell you what, I'd really value, Winnie, is some encouragement to people who struggle to live with difference. Where there's a lot of people within our church who are just saying, doesn't matter what you say. It says in Scripture, 1 Timothy. We all know it. What would you say to people who really are struggling to live with the difference?
So my parents are from the Orthodox churches in Central Kerala. They're wonderful academic traditions, but I think because they're not strong teaching traditions. So you have these scholar bishops who don't teach prophetically from a pulpit, frankly. So if I sit and eat with them, they'll say, of course, we should be inclusive. Of course, women should be ordained. Come do service with us. You go to church on Sunday and they don't speak to the culture. They say the things they think that people can tolerate, is what they say. And so I don't come from families, where we have a lot of teaching on LGBT inclusion, particular, or women's inclusion. Both would be like fighting words in Central Kerala, where I'm from. And they would say, exactly as you all would say, I think, that our culture of Malayali Syrian Christians is upheld by a patriarchal order. And if we undermine the males in our family and we don't make sure to prop them up or support them because they're so fragile, which I don't experience them at all to be, then it all falls apart. Who are we? without the caste that we come from and the community we come from. And I think I hear the exact same thing in what you're saying. And we can quote the Bible absolutely as well on both sides. Absolutely. Right. And so what we're talking about, and what those bishops always tell me is we're talking about culture, and they'll say culture is not external to God's action. Culture is not external to the, it's not so far removed from the text and evil. We don't find something pure in the text, but we defend our culture. And we can biblicize our culture, right? We can theologize our culture. I think it's easier for people like me who are immigrant to see it because it's so distinctive and wrong when I see that in Kerala. How dare we, justify that women can be abused because we're protecting the family, because and we can quote in the Bible why that's okay, that we do everything we can to hold a marriage and family together, right? That children can be abused because we hold a family together. So they're holding values that I don't, as an American, understand. So I can see that those are from the culture. And in the same way, as an Indian, I see things that we defend by the text in this culture that make no sense to me because it's not where I come from. And so I think I get this a little bit of clarity, a little bit more clarity. And what I hear is a cultural defense. The Bible in defense of culture is something we all do. I do it, no doubt. I will tell you from the Bible why I should be included in your church. But I'm using the Bible for my ends. We all can do that, but that's not why I think I should actually be included. If I really do my work, it's different than that. And so it's about what I believe God is for and God is about and how God is revealed in this time. And so I'd encourage people, frankly, to think about, I mean, I don't want to be condescending, but our tradition, our incarnational Anglican tradition, tells us to pay a lot of attention to the life of people around us. That's how we're supposed to address poverty and equity. And if you pay attention to the life of people around you, I actually don't believe you think LGBT people or women are a fundamentally different matter than you are and disoriented to their living. I just don't actually think that's true. But I respect that if you break open the way you have been taught to think about who you are and the culture you come from, and what you should stand for its preservation, that is psychologically devastating. And I will offer, and I don't mean this in any way in an insulting way, but I think it will sound insulting, but I think this is Christian language, right? And it's my journey as well. I am constantly humiliated in the best sense of the term, and stripped down to a miss that where I have not understood, where I have not been compassionate, where I don't see people, and have to rethink it. And I literally think that is the work of my salvation. And in living in the city of New York, it happens to me every single day. Someone or kind of thing I don't want to see, don't know how to see, find myself full of bias towards in my very middle class upbringing, stripped down, and I just feel humiliated that I don't want to see because I want to keep living. It is the work of our salvation to become more humane in that way.
I think that's really important, Winnie. You talked there about culture, and something that I'm very passionate about is I'm proudly working class, and my struggles to be ordained minister in the Church of England, and I've raised a private members motion within the church for vocations for working class people, and I've seen bishops and people walk past the beggar on the street, and we all do it, and we're all guilty of that, which does talk about our unhuman frailties. But where are you as a church with the kind of idea of raising up the hidden treasures that are out there, and those people that maybe to look at their lifestyle or what they offer, maybe just to see them, you might think, oh no, but when you actually get to know them, you go, oh yes, there's somebody wonderful here. What work do you do there?
Yeah, so one, I think we have the same problem. And I remember hearing from an elderly priest that the primary problem of the Episcopal Church is it keeps generating middle class priests. That the middle class people are so insecure that it makes for just there's a nothing in the middle of a middle class person, but working class. And he was a very, very wealthy person. So I think he was arguing that the very poor, the very wealthy, and the wealthy have a lot in common because they're not trying to pretend to be respectable, frankly. So it's an absurd critique in some ways, but very accurate in many ways as well. I don't know what to say about the wealthy, but I respect that working people, that working people that aren't aspiring to appear middle class are confusing for the Episcopal Church. I think a lot of vocations, actually know, vocations are denied because people don't pass as middle class, and middle and upper middle class immigrants are who we ordain as immigrants. We don't recognize you without an undergraduate degree that you've already paid for. One of the reasons, again, I'm back in New York, is I think we have a bishop who can see past that. But how in this diocese in the past, far past, has had alternative tracks to ordination, which meant that that was for different language groups, but also it meant you could stay in place, you stay in work, you stay in your community, and you're being trained in your context. That's not as novel in your context. It's very novel in our context. We are such a church of the elite, and we're proud of it. And even when we say it, we say it as a problem in our history. What I hear underneath that from almost anyone that says it, including people of color, is pride. That they are associating themselves with a proud institution. And so there's real work to do, I think. And I actually think contextual theological education is better than a separated out a separated out 3-year
Mm.
residential seminary education. I am in the minority in that. I don't think it's good to conform everyone to a same model and to minoritize a whole bunch of people that will probably be your strongest leaders. I think
Amen.
contextual, yeah, sorry?
Amen.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
think
definitely.
you disenfranchise people. My bishop told me not to go to an Episcopal seminary. He said, you'll either leave the church or you'll lose your soul. So I went to Union, which just because of its social justice proclamation kind of roots you in your own story, like really hard work in your own story. But I think contextual theological education is the other way to do it that is not as expensive as a Union, but also is just true to how people live. Um, and so what my perspective on that comes from the church in India, that absolutely understands training clergy as a way to train people from communities that cannot afford education, to proclaim the gospel. And I don't think they do it because that's the only ones they can get. I think those are the right ones, is how they think about that. Which I mean, that's where I come from. I agree.
Yeah, just a quick, I mean, I'm mindful of time, but I think there's something about educating the educator as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Where the educator is, somebody who went to, in UK terms, Harrow or Harvard in America, and the guys come from an estate, in Brooklyn or Manchester, wherever it may be.
Yeah.
You think that's fair?
One of my friends, who was brilliant, brilliant New Testament scholar, used to teach at Sing Sing, and Sing Sing is one of our prisons where, I mean, if you're in Sing Sing, you're probably staying for the rest of your life. And all these classes were offered there, including seminary classes. And he taught Paul at Sing Sing, and he taught Paul at General Theological Seminary. And he basically said that people at General didn't read and didn't get it, but wanted to be priests really badly, you know. And he said the guys at Sing Sing got it. They got Paul. They also were in prison. Like he said, the insight that he received into the letters of Paul as a professor from Union Theological Seminary, right? So one of the it's one of the great prestigious degrees in that field in our country. Learned so much about Paul and himself in those classes. So absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Winnie, thanks for your time. I'm just wondering if you could finish with the podcast with maybe a word of encouragement for everybody listening or watching. The world seems a very fragile, dangerous place at the moment, doesn't it? And we are just literally a few days away from celebrating Christmas. Could you maybe just by finishing by a joyous hope of word of hope and encouragement?
Yeah, I'll start with one thing. I have, we're all getting our Christmas cards right now. So I have these stacks of Christmas cards. And in general, they say a beautiful verse in the Bible, beautiful image, and Merry Christmas or a Happy Christmas, something like that. This year, I've received a couple that are just stark readings from the Lamentation of Jeremiah or something like that. And no, like, Happy Christmas at the end. Just ends with like whatever that bleak last line is. And I think that is the world we live in right now. It, it is, it is a particularly grim time, and particularly for those that are impacted by the decisions of our leaders. So, what I would offer, and interestingly, right, in response to these really grim times, I'm noticing over and over again, including our new mayor saying, consider an act of kindness or generosity. And it's interesting to me, these small actions of kindness are a response to fascism, emergent around us. And a little bit of that is absurd. A little bit of that is true about the dignity of the person. So, what I'd encourage is, however you can, I think Christmas calls us to this, is in that whole scene of those first characters around the baby Jesus are people that have no dignity and whose dignity has been stripped in the community they live in. They have been told to run across, the lands because the emperor demands it, while in no shape to do it. And day laborers come because they hear that the story they tell is they saw angels in the sky singing. Like, sounds like they've been drinking, right? Like, that's the crew. That's the crew at the beginning. And that's the crew we're to look to for dignity. And so I would say stand in your dignity and spend your time looking for the dignity of others and proclaim it to them. Stand in your dignity right now and remember that you are made in the image of God.
Lovely. That's lovely, Winnie. I'm going to get my dog. I promised I'd show you. Have you got yours nearby? Let's just show the viewers our.
Cash.
Wait, let's say
Hey,
this.
Cash. Cashew.
Here he is.
Oh, look at you. Come
So
here,
this
Cash.
is this
He's
is George.
He's beautiful.
I've got
Well,
another one upstairs. George is a Patterdale Terrier. So
oh,
the breed originates from the Lake District, where lots of Americans come and visit when they come over to the UK. He's George
cool.
and he's a handful. And you've got there, tell us about your dog quickly.
This is Akash. We call him Cash, and he is a toy poodle, and he's a rescue from the pageant circuit, or whatever they call it, the dog show circuit. So he's the celebrity in our household.
I'm sure he gets lots of attention.
He does. He does okay. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Winnie, thank you so much. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy lady, but well, many blessings from the north of England. If you ever get a chance to come to the UK, please don't just go to London. Come north because it's proper up there. We say in Lancashire, it's proper.
Love that. I love that. Well, and if you ever find yourself here, please come to our cathedral,
I
please.
will definitely,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, Winnie, thank
All
you
right.
so much. God bless you.
Bye.
Bye bye.